Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lungarno Chats. We have a fantastic evening tonight. I'm super excited to have David Bach on tonight, one of America's favorite and most famous financial experts, to help us navigate some of these unprecedented times. And also Jane Farrell, deputy editor from the Florentine, who will give us a update on what is happening virtually that we should be aware of. So before we get started, I'd like to give a little introduction on some recent observations that we found. So why don't we jump right in? So just to make everyone aware, the Florentine, fantastic publication here in Florence, has gone online with a lot of their events called TF Together, and they put out an extraordinary amount of community events that are now all accessible and free. They do go on with support from viewers, so donations are obviously welcome, but it's a great source of interesting information. This month, they're coming out with a limited print edition of their Healing Not Broken commemorative edition. It's 106 pages. It really documents the streets of Florence and what the city went through. So it's going to be a historic edition. So I recommend everyone to get a copy. It's only 20 euros. And this month, there's a fantastic interview, which happens to be with David Bach by Helen Farrell, the editor of the Florentine. It's a wonderful interview that happened right before the lockdown. So I encourage everyone to read it. It really is a great insight into David's history and also what brought him to Florence. And finally, I'd like to remind everyone of the British Institute. They've moved a lot of their wonderful cultural programs online every Wednesday. They also have a series now, an art history series, which is a 5-seminar series. Again, wonderful programming, which now is accessible to everyone online. So here's some recent observations that I'd like to share with you. And I thought we'd start by going on and having a look at how are we adapting to life at home. Well, one of the things I like to do is go on Google Trends. A lot of the social media platforms have ways that you can do searches on what's trending. So I thought I'd put in a search between Gucci handbags and how to grow tomatoes. And Gucci handbags was definitely more popular until about March. And now how to grow tomatoes is definitely dwarfing the interest of Gucci handbags, which I thought was interesting. We're also embracing a lot of new services. Here's City Sitter Stream. This is an on-demand virtual babysitting service through Zoom. For anyone that has kids, couldn't be more welcome. So for $20 or so an hour, there's a wonderful counselor that can do interesting activities with your kids. We're still struggling with adapting to some technologies. Here's a priest in Italy about to give mass, and he forgot to turn off the filters and effects. And so all sorts of interesting side effects came about during his mass. We're also struggling with wardrobe still. Here's Good Morning America, and Will Reeves forgot to put on his pants. Ironically, he said, "I finally made it" when this picture went viral. Not only is he an accomplished journalist, but he happens to be the son of Christopher Reeve, also known as Superman. And some of us, no matter how we try, it's just not good enough. I actually went out this morning to make sure this sign wasn't outside my house, but there's some extreme measures being taken place. Let's have a look at what's happening outside of our house. And as some of you may have noticed, a lot of our streets are empty, and so are our parking lots. I've always loved the parking lot business. It's organic growth and demand and appreciating assets. But as of 2018, the parking business has really taken a hit. Uber and Lyft and other ride-sharing services have really taken a bite out of parking revenue. Restaurants, for example, have reported that they've seen about a 25% decrease in demand for parking. Hotels is about 10 to 15%. And then recently, that's been exacerbated. The parking market is quite big worldwide. It's about a $130 billion market. And the commuter parking activity is about down to 50 to 70%. A visitor is about down 95%. This is a big problem for municipalities. For New York City, for example, they budget just over $1 billion in parking-related revenue per year. And in Santa Monica, parking-related revenue is about 30% of their budget. This has pretty much gone away, and it's a big hole that needs to be filled. There's been some innovation in this space. So here's a startup company called Boxcar. They tried to bring innovation to the parking business, and they've seen their revenues go pretty much down to zero. They've quickly pivoted and repurposed their parking infrastructure to provide on-demand pop-up grocery services, and within 3 weeks, the revenue has grown more than their parking revenue. And then there's been this movement of converting streets to pedestrian walkways and bike lanes, and it's been trending on social media under the hashtag of COVID-19 streets. And cities are looking at the typologies of their streets and really trying to optimize the flow and mobility to try to keep people safe. New York City, for example, has dedicated over 100 miles to pedestrian streets, and this is happening pretty much all over the country. So street closures, fare suspensions, bike share, and all over the world. Here's a list of cities and how many kilometers they've dedicated to bike paths and pedestrian walkways. So it's over 1,000 kilometers of streets which now have been converted. France started a program where they're providing a 50 euro credit to anyone that brings in and fixes up an old bike to try to alleviate the reliance on public transportation. Vilnius in Lithuania is actually converting a lot of their town squares to giving them over to restaurants and cafes. And I can only imagine, here's a waitress trying to serve at 1.5 meter distance, throwing a cup of coffee to a table. So I think there's plenty of challenges that have to be, we'll see how they get worked out. Yet off our shores, it's a different story. Here's a snapshot of Long Beach Port. It's littered with super tankers. As we discussed in our last chat, there's been a glut of oil because of the lack in demand. So basically, there's about 20% of the world's oil now floating off the coast of California. And this map shows basically all the super tankers around the world with nowhere basically to unload their oil. And the prices have skyrocketed from $16,000 per day to about $42,000 in the US, and they hit about $175,000 per day in Asia. I think when we look back at this period, I think we're going to acknowledge it as a period in which robots became finally ubiquitous. In this chart, there's basically a spectrum of the functions that robots fulfill across different countries and their functions. And these span from public safety, so something from quarantine enforcement, disinfecting public spaces, to clinical care, such as disinfecting within hospitals, and to delivery, and also all the way down to delivery to quarantined area. And how many countries have adopted these? These are disinfecting robots that basically can go into a hospital room or a hotel room and quickly disinfect the whole room with UV lights. These are robots that can disinfect the public streets. And then cooking has also been adopted. So here in this kiosk, for example, can produce 100 pots of rice in an hour. So this is helping workers on the front line. This is Tommy. Tommy is a robot that's been adopted in hospitals here in Italy. This is a hospital in Varese in northern Italy, one of the hardest hit areas. And Tommy performs some critical functions. They allowed the communication between patients and the medical staff by minimizing the contact and the risk with the medical staff, and also cutting down on the use of masks and protective gear, which was in really short supply. Hopefully they will program these robots with some compassion. Here's a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in an intensive care unit. So let's look at a quick snapshot at the economy. If you look at what's happened in the last few weeks, we basically, our federal debt as a percentage of GDP has skyrocketed, and it's forecasted to be at about 107% of our yearly GDP. That's higher than it was at World War II. So massive amount of new debt. Oil, we discussed this last time. It came back out of negative territory, but now it's stabilized around $12 a barrel, and it was averaging around 60 last year. And then unfortunately, unemployment. It's hit about 30 million new claims, and unemployment is just under 19% right now. Yet, this I thought was staggering. The NASDAQ, if you look at where it was in December to where it was today, it's exactly at the same rate. It's almost as the market says, yeah, we've had volatility in the last 6 months, but besides that, the companies that make up the NASDAQ are pretty much as healthy and will make the same amount of money as they did 6 months ago. So this has left, I think, a lot of people uneasy. And the only way that I can really describe the sentiment is that of a mountain goat. I call it the mountain goat factor. We're stuck on the side of a dam, not really sure whether to go up, go down, sell stocks, buy stocks, stay still. And so I'm hoping that with David today, he can help us feel less of mountain goats. So just to introduce David, we'll have him on in just a few minutes. David is a financial expert and 10 times New York Times best-selling author. Tony Robbins, in his in the Latte Factor, David's latest book, said basically, if you're intimidated by finance, you need to read David's book. So David is a media personality. He's been on Oprah multiple times. So I'm super excited to have his expertise here. And before we talk with David, I'd like to just introduce Jane Farrell again, Deputy Editor of La Florentine. She always gives us an update on what's going on in town. So I'd like to pass it over to you, Jane. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Morgan. I'm Jane from the Florentine. We're certainly edging ever so gradually towards our former freedoms again. But by and large, our sources of entertainment are still digital. We have museums, exhibitions, and libraries hopes to reopen on the 18th of May, which we're certainly excited about and eagerly awaiting. But in the meantime, there are plenty of resources to give us our cultural kick at home. So I'd like to share with you a few of those now. The first one is the Con l'arte, una finestra sulla cultura. Maybe the other slide there, Alexandra. There's a very impressive archive of activities organized by the Fondazione CR Firenze. It contains contributions from over 100 participating artists, theaters, museums, and galleries. The project is divided by theme into children, museums, performances, music, and art, and offers varied resources for home entertainment and learning. There's a combination of online classes, digitized archives, museum tours, readings, and so much there that it's certain to provide hours of escapism as well as education. There's a huge selection for children as well, in case you're trying to entertain any young ones at home. And what I found great are the quizzes as well, in case you've taken to doing Zoom quizzes with friends, like many of us have. Plenty of sources for questions there. The next one then is the Maggio Musicale Fiorentino. The Opera House has introduced the streaming service of past performances, which have been so far programmed until the end of July. Evenings will be dedicated to Verdi, Puccini, and Mozart, among many others. Listeners can join in by going to the theatre's Facebook page and on their website. There's nothing quite like filling your apartment with glorious music to transport you elsewhere, so I definitely recommend putting that on maximum volume. I doubt your neighbours would complain too much, unless perhaps you decide to join in, then they might. Museo Galileo then is the next one. They have a range of wonderful activities, including a virtual tour so that we can roam the corridors and the collection at our leisure. There are also hundreds of short educational videos on their website, and they've also created illustrated booklets in both English and Italian, exploring the explorers, Galileo Galilei, Amerigo Vespucci, and Pietro Leopoldo. I find it's quite soothing to wander the world mentally when we can't physically do so right now. It's possibly the next best thing. The next one then is Manifatture Tabacchi. The Living Room series from Manifatture Tabacchi brings culture and contemporary art to our sofas. Focusing on research and experimentation, there is regular content released via their socials channels, with film, books, podcasts, poems, interviews, and various artistic contributions. There's really a packed program and a multidisciplinary approach, so there's something for everyone. The last one then I'd like to share is the Biblioteca Nazionale di Firenze. They've launched a series called Viaggiare con Libri on their Facebook page, regularly posting photos, videos, and stories, sharing the rich heritage of the National Library here in Florence. They grant access to the vast collections so that you can delve deeper into whatever subject interests you the most. Hopefully it won't be too long before I have a more regular events lineup for you all, but in the meantime I think there's more than enough there to occupy these hours and keep ourselves both mentally stimulated and entertained. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was really helpful. And now it's my pleasure to introduce David.
Morgan, hello. Hi, everybody.
David, it's great to have you here.
My friend, it's so good to be here. And I just saw these numbers. Let me ask you a question. If we had done this live at the British Institute, which is what we had planned to do, right? Like we'll talk about the pivots that we're going to start making in this time. That's the most beautiful room at the British Institute, but how many people would that room have fit?
So comfortably, I think it's 85, and then usually we squeeze in a few extra.
So we're going to end up having 10 times the amount of people here online today. I see there's over 500 viewers when we started, and this is such a great example of like, through adversity comes opportunities to do things in a new way. And I just give the Florentine so much credit for putting this on, because the Florentine has done such an amazing job of pivoting during this time. And thank you for hosting this and bringing the Lungarno Chats to everybody's home now around the world. So this is now not just a Florence thing. This is going all over the world.
No, it really is fantastic. And I remember we had lunch together probably about 6 or 7 months ago, and I was so excited. I was obviously aware about your books, but I wasn't aware with your story. And one of the things that struck me was that you basically started when you were 7 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Can you take us back? And I love that.
Yeah, well, so people who've read my books know a little bit about this story, but for those who don't, I bought my first stock at the age of 7. And this is kind of the perfect quarantine story too, because I know a lot of you are home with your kids right now. And I want to talk about how you can teach your kids about money. But at 7, my grandmother, Rose Bach, this incredible woman who started with absolutely nothing, no college education. She sold wigs at Gimbel's department store. My grandmother became a self-made millionaire by saving 50 cents a week out of her paycheck, putting it in a coffee can, and investing over her lifetime. And what she gave us was the gift of learning how to be an investor. She taught my father how to invest. She taught myself, and she taught my sister. And my family's been in the investment business for over 50 years now. But at 7, as a little kid, my favorite restaurant in the whole world was McDonald's. So at McDonald's, my grandmother taught me this great little lesson, which now you can teach your kids, which is this. I'm sitting there, I'm eating my Big Mac, I'm having my French fries, and she says, David, today I'm going to teach you how to play Monopoly for real. And the reason, Morgan, she talked about Monopoly is that was my favorite game to play. And in fact, we've been playing a lot of Monopoly at my house during the quarantine because I have a 16-year-old Jack, you better be watching right now, and James, who's 10. And my grandmother knew I wanted to be rich. I did as a young kid. And so she said, I'm going to teach you how to play Monopoly for real. She said, I want you to go over to the manager right now, and I'm going to give you $1 to do this, because I was a super shy kid at the time. And she said, go ask the manager, is McDonald's publicly traded? And I was like, no. And she's like, $1. I'm like, okay, $1, I'll go, right? So I go up to the manager. He comes back to where we're sitting, and he looks at my grandmother, and he says, he introduces himself. He says, I'm the manager of McDonald's. How can I help you? And she said, well, I want to find out if you're publicly traded. And he says, yes, we are. And she says, well, could you tell me where? And he says, the New York Stock Exchange. And she says, okay. Well, I actually knew that, but I wanted my grandson here, who's 7 years old, to learn how to ask today, because I'm going to teach him how to buy stock today in McDonald's so that he can become an investor. And he looked at me and he goes, oh man, you're so lucky, because McDonald's has done so well as a stock. And so that day she takes me home and she said, when you were at McDonald's, you were what's called a consumer. You were the kid spending money and eating. And the people that were working there, they were working on minimum wage. And that's a really tough way to make a living. She said, the people who get rich are the people who own McDonald's. So she opened up the Wall Street Journal. She circled MCD. She taught me how that was a stock symbol. And then she put me in front of her television set, which at the time, Morgan, was a black and white TV, because my grandmother was not spending money on a color television back then. And so she taught me how to read the ticker symbol back in the old days with news, right? Like when you're a kid, you have no idea what a ticker symbol is, but she taught me, when MCD goes across the screen, you're going to see a price. And she gave me a pad of paper and she had me write that price down. And she's like, call it out. So I'd like $17, and I didn't understand percentages at the time, but I'd say 17.3/4. I didn't know what that meant, right? And so when it was all over after an hour, she's like, okay, that's the price of the stock. Now we're gonna go down to a brokerage firm and I'm gonna buy you 1 share of that stock. And you're gonna own McDonald's. And when you go to McDonald's, you'll make money from yourself and all your friends who go there too. And that was at 7, and that changed my life. And so at 9, I'm at Disneyland. I go running up to Disney. I'm like, hey, Mickey, are you guys publicly traded, right? Like, so I bought my second stock at 9 in McDonald's. And here's the thing: when this whole thing happened and we went into quarantine, as you know, like the market had a huge correction. I mean, it was the worst correction I've seen in my entire career, and I've been doing this since I've been in the investment business since 1993. I'll talk about my dad in a little bit. I've been going to I started going to my dad's investment classes at 9. It was the worst correction I'd ever seen. And I was, like everybody, sort of a little shocked and somewhat depressed. And I told my kids, like, the market's had the worst correction we've ever seen. But I'm going to teach you how to invest the way my grandmother taught me. You've heard me tell this story before. Now we're going to have class with Dad. And so we had Invest with Dad Day, which was about an hour of focused attention. Probably would be easier for me to go teach your kids than teach my own kids, but I got him for an hour and we did homeschooling with Dad, and I walked him through this lesson. And I tell it this way because I want so many of you who are still in quarantine, you can do this with your kids. I sat my kids down, I told them this story, and I said, okay, right now the market's down, but this recession that we're about to go through, this global recession, is going to create opportunities to build wealth like you'll never see in your lifetime. Like every 10 years when this happens, it is an opportunity to build wealth. And they go, well, how? How does that happen? I go, because certain companies right now, Morgan, told the kids this, are going to do really well. So what we want to look for right now, like I liked McDonald's at the time, we want to look for companies that can do well right now. Now we're sitting around my conference, you know, my dining table. I called it a conference table, my dining table. And I said, so what do you think are some good companies that could do well right now? And James, who's 10 years old, looks around and he goes, well, Dad, if everybody's going to get sick, what about Kleenex? How about we buy Kleenex? I go, well, let's find out if Kleenex is publicly traded. So I had him go on, today it's easier. You go to Google, is Kleenex publicly traded? And it's not, right? But it's owned by a publicly traded company. It's owned by Kimberly-Clark. So then, okay, great. Is Kimberly-Clark publicly traded? Up pops the symbol. So now, unlike having to watch a black and white television set, my kids can instantly see the stock symbol. They can see the price. Now I'd opened up a custodial account for them on TD, and then I helped them buy their first stock. So after that stock, I said, well, what else, James? He's like, well, what about Clorox? I mean, everybody's going to rush out and buy cleaning products, Dad. Pretty smart kid for 10 years old. You are, James. You're a very smart kid. I'm like, you're right. Let's look it up. Who makes Clorox? Procter & Gamble. I start showing him all the companies that Procter & Gamble owns. Like, well, that would be a good company. Now, my teenager is sitting across from me, Jack, and I go, what do you think, Jack? He goes, well, how about Zoom? All these things we're doing are on Zoom. I've had all my classes on Zoom. We look up Zoom. I happen to know Zoom had just gone public recently. Yeah, Zoom's publicly traded. So Jack bought Zoom. So the key thing at this point is not so much what the price was that my kids bought these stocks. It is that I want to train them through this time to recognize, and I want, truthfully, everybody's watching, train you to recognize that these times create opportunities. You just showed the NASDAQ a second ago. Not everything's going down. Not everything's being destroyed. Not everything's being wiped out. A lot of businesses are doing very well. So we have to train ourselves to see the opportunity, to see, I'm holding a glass right now. It happens to be, is it half full or is it half empty, right? And we have to see this as half full or 3/4 full, because that to me is the way in which we come through this time and we thrive versus survive as we look for those opportunities. And that is a lesson that my grandmother taught me that ultimately shifted and changed my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like she was extremely able to make it relatable to you. And I was wondering if that's something, seems like that's something that stuck with you when you were when you started your career and started doing seminars, you saw an opportunity. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, let me step back one more second too, because I, give my father credit here. My dad was a financial advisor and recently retired. Hi, Dad, if you're watching. My dad just had his 80th birthday. Happy birthday, Dad!
Nice. Happy birthday!
And I went to my dad's investment classes at 9, and my dad dressed me up in a suit and tie, and I handed out the little flyers, and I watched my dad teach a class for 2 hours, and I watched my father, in the time he would teach his class with like 100 people, and I watched my dad bring investing to life for people in our community. And at the break, people would come up to me and they would say, your dad changed my whole life. I was able to retire because of what I learned in your father's classes. I was able to send my kids to college because of what your dad taught me. And so it was like, wow, I just thought I didn't know what my dad really did. He did something in front of a computer with stocks. And so I got to see like teaching is life-changing. And there's nothing cooler than when you're teaching and, I can't see it right now because I can't see the audience, but I can see the comments. But I love when you teach, Morgan, and you can literally see the switch go off in a person's eyes. Like they got it. And you know that they got it. And you know that means if they go home and take action, it's going to change their life. So what happened to me, which my change of course with my life, is that in 1993, I came in the investment business alongside my father, and we had a lot of older clients. And my father, we had multiple clients pass away and become widowed in a 30-day period of time. And by the way, important thing for ladies to know, it's almost always the men who go first. 80% of men die married and 80% of women die widowed. And I didn't know that at the time. What I saw at the time was that we were teaching our clients who were widows how to read their brokerage statements and how to write checks. And I just couldn't fathom this. And I said to my dad, what's going on here? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, how come I have all these women clients who don't know what's going on with the finances? And he said, David, your grandmother was not the norm. So many of our clients, it's been the husband who's taken charge of the finances. And I'm, my mom's probably watching because my mom watches everything I do. Hi, Mom, if you're watching. And I love you, Mom. And I went to lunch with my mom and I told my mom this story about what was going on in the office, how we had clients that were dying and I was teaching our widowed clients how to write checks. And I said to my mom, do you know what's going on with personal finances? And she's like, yeah, your father handles it. I go, well, Mom, if anything happens to Dad, what would you do? And she's like, I would have you. I'm like, well, Mom, what if something happens to me? She's like, well, I would have your sister. I'm like, okay, that's not the point, Mom. The point is you need to know what's going on in the money with like Grandma Bach does. And she started telling me about her friends who were going through divorce and being hurt financially through that. And I said, Mom, I'm thinking I'm going to teach a class on investing for women and teach the lessons that Grandma Bach taught me. And she's like, that's a great idea. If you do that, I'll go. You invite the clients and I'll invite my friends. And we sent out a mailer. This is back in 1994. The class was called Smart Women Finish Rich. And everybody told me nobody was going to come. It wasn't going to work. There wasn't going to be interest. And we had 225 women want to come to the first seminar. And I started teaching that class back in 1994. I got asked in that first class, what's a good book for women and money? I didn't know if there was one. It turned out there wasn't. And like 3 years later, after teaching that class over and over again, I went and wrote a book. And that book is Smart Women Finish Rich. That was my first book. And it was dedicated to my grandmother. And that's what started my whole career in writing. And the reason I wrote that book was I was a financial advisor, but I realized there was a limit to how many people I could work with one-on-one. But if I put my lessons into a book, I might be able to go help a lot more people. And then my mission became, I want to help inspire 1 million women to take charge of their financial life so they can protect themselves, teach their kids, and protect their families financially. And that was 25 years ago. I'm still doing it. That little book that people told me no one would buy, Smart Women Finish Rich, the first book, that book has sold over 1 million copies. And we've had over 1 million women go through our seminars. And somebody just asked me, what do you want to do going forward? Like the beauty of this now, where I can get on a stream like this, I think we can go impact millions of more people because of this technology. So I just love teaching this stuff. That's what I've been doing for a long, long time.
That's fantastic. And how fortunate that you had Rose Bach in your life to really, instill that, because I think you pointed out in an interview, I said, it's just mind-boggling that you don't learn about personal finance in high school or in college, that you're kind of left on your own. It's just incredible.
It's criminal, arguably. It's actually criminal. I think it shouldn't be allowed. And I've been talking about this for 25 years. It hasn't made 30 years. It hasn't made a difference. Like financial education should be mandatory in school, period. You shouldn't actually be able to graduate high school, in my opinion, without passing a financial literacy test, right? Like basic financial literacy. Like people should actually know what compound interest is, how saving and investing, what it can look like, what debt can do to you in the wrong way. It's compound interest in reverse. People should know before they go borrow money for school what the impact of that can be for the rest of your life. But the system is set up to keep people broke. And it's, the way you would fix that is through financial education. There's, this little book there. This is my latest book here, The Latte Factor. This book is a little tiny story. You can read this in about an hour. And the simple lessons in this book, I wrote this book to specifically reach young people. I got my teenager to read this book. It was the first one of my books he read because it's a story, and really reach millennials. This kind of stuff should have just been taught in school. By the time you were in 9th or 10th grade, you should have been learning this stuff. Now, a lot of people are now using these books in school, but yeah, I mean, I could go on a rant on that for an hour. But really, financial education needs to begin at home. Yeah. We started this story with my grandma's story, and the way I taught my kids, you could start teaching your kids about investing at home. And that's what I highly recommend you do, because they're not going to teach it in school.
Absolutely. One of the concepts that I thought was really interesting is, for people that have financial problems, the solution is not more money. And it sounds so simple. Can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, well, I would say, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. I mean, like if you're going to write notes down, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And if anywhere you can see that, it's in America, right? Because in America, you have families that are making 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 still living paycheck to paycheck. Across the world, about 7 out of 10 people live paycheck to paycheck. In the US, one of the reasons this is so difficult, what we're going through, and it's difficult here in Italy, it's difficult all over the world, but so difficult to not work for 2 months means the average person is totally broke. Because in America today, according to the US government, half of America before the virus didn't have $500 in an emergency account. And 7 out of 10 Americans didn't have $1,000 in an emergency account. And so what happens is people make more money as they spend more money. Now, it's not because, the reason people spend more money as they make more money is because of marketing. So really smart businesses, well, there's lots of reasons for it, but really smart businesses are really good at separating you and I from our paycheck. And it's lifestyle creep, right? So the more you make, then you want nicer things. And then you move to a nicer community, and you want a nicer car, you want nicer stuff. And if anything, what's happened with this quarantine, I think a lot of us are starting to realize, like, we don't really need all this stuff. Like, one thing that's happening is we've all stayed home. We're not going anywhere, so we're saving a whole lot of money. But I think it's making a lot of us question, like, maybe I didn't need all this stuff. And I always tell people, when you go to work, you trade your time for money. Unless you love what you do, you're trading part of your life for money. And the point of that money is to free yourself. Right. So one of the things I've taught for years is this idea of paying yourself first, automatically, not budgeting, saving 1 hour a day of your income. And when you do that, if you pay yourself first, whatever your income level is, 1 hour a day of your income, you can build financial security for life. And the Latte Factor, why it became so popular, and it's all over the world now, that phrase, is I started telling people, $5 a day that you're spending on coffee or bottled water or cigarettes, if you didn't spend that money and you just started and took that money and put it in an investment account, like my grandmother taught me how to do, you just bought an index fund. Warren Buffett yesterday talked about just buy the S&P 500 index fund. If you just did that, over your lifetime, you could become a self-made millionaire. And it's not that you need to have $1 million in savings. The first thing people need is 6, 7, 8 months worth of expenses set aside. So I've just been on this crusade to constantly teach people, It's not your income. It's the system that you use to keep your income that matters. It's learning how to free yourself financially.
There's another thing that struck me in the book, which was if you don't know where you're going, you might not like where you go.
Where you end up.
Yeah, where you end up.
Yeah.
How does that relate not just to your financial life, but to overall, your overall life in general?
Well, so the beginning of the Latte Factor, the main character is a woman named Zoe Daniels, and she's a young millennial, and she's working actually in the Freedom Tower, which happens to be, I used to live in Manhattan before I moved to Florence, and the Freedom Tower is about 250 yards from my old apartment. And so Zoe Daniels comes up, she's underneath this area called the Oculus, and she comes and she's walking underneath the Oculus, which is underneath the Freedom Tower, and she sees there's this giant LCD screen. It's the largest LCD screen in the world. And she sees this advertisement that says, if you don't know where you're going, you might not like where you end up. And as she comes up the escalator, she sits down for the first, she's been walking by the 9/11 memorial for years, going to her office, just rushing to work. And after she sees this phrase, she sits down on a bench. She looks at the 9/11 memorial. She sees people mourning, and she asks herself this question: where is she going with her life? And that's what begins the story of the Latte Factor. Because the story of the Latte Factor, the book itself, is not about giving up your coffee. It's actually about designing your life and going for your dreams. And she learns how to design her life and go for her dreams. And in the book, it turns out she's a travel writer who works for a travel publication, and she never travels because she's working so much. And her dream is to travel more. And as I was writing this book, I was working on my next dreams. And in the book, Zoe learns how to take what I call a radical sabbatical. And I was working on my radical sabbatical, which led me to come to Florence. And I think, the lesson, if you don't know where you're going, you might not like where you end up, is that time in our lives fly by. And we can almost become hypnotized by our life, where we're just going through the motions of life. And yet I think what's so important is that we live our life super consciously, and we design our life, and we ask ourselves, where do we want to go? Again, I'll use this quarantine as an example right now. Like, some people have been watching Netflix online, kind of checked out. And some people are really consciously thinking, what do they want for a life that's new when they come out of this quarantine? When this is over, what's next for you? And I think that's what I recommend. Like, how do you make your future bigger than your past? And how do you make the next 10 years the best of your life? It's one of the things, as I've gone around the country and I've done seminars for retirees, I always talk about this idea that you need to stop waiting, that you need to take the next 10 years of your life and pretend like that's all you've got left. If you only had 10 years left to live, what would you want to do in the next 10 years? And you should work on that plan right now. And then take the 10 years and go, what if you only had 3 years left to live? What do you need to get done the next 3 years that's really important to you? Who do you need to tell you, I always say, have your I love yous in check. Who do you need to talk to? Who do you want to spend the next 3 years with? Stop assuming we're going to always be here. Life goes by like this. Like, living in Florence, especially in a Renaissance city with thousands of years of history. I'm actually recording. I'm with you live right now. I'm in a property that Galileo, let's talk about the Galileo Museum. I'm in a property that Galileo used to live in. Now, he wasn't in this kitchen, but this is actually like property, land that Galileo lived in the late, and he was here, the commemorative sign on the wall here that people come and take pictures of, 1609. This is property that Galileo lived in, and life moves on. And so I just think it's about living a life super consciously, where you, like, if anything right now, this time, the coronavirus should be a check-in on where do you want to go with your life, and then get going on it. Once you're free to leave your house safely.
Yeah. Well, what struck me also about your career is how many times you sort of took risks and reinvented yourself, whether that was by design or not. Can you just, you start off as teaching seminars, wealth management, becoming a writer. That must have been a very scary move. And even this, building a media company and now deciding to take this radical sabbatical and move your family to Florence. Like, how did you go through these decisions? They must not have been easy. And how do you assess those risks?
So this is like a giant Grandma Bach show today, but these are all true stories. So, and this lesson's actually in the Latte Factor. It's in the very end of the book. My grandmother knew I was writing Smart Women Finish Rich. And at 86, my grandmother had a stroke and she was in a nursing care facility. And so I was finishing the book, and my grandmother knew that these lessons of hers were in the book. And I said, Grandma, you've shared, you were my mentor. You've taught me all these lessons, but like, give me last lessons for me. And she said, no, you're good. I've taught you everything you need to know. And I asked my grandmother if she had any regrets in life. And she actually said no, which is amazing. And then the next day I came to visit her in the nursing care facility, and I said, how'd you sleep? And she said, terrible. I was up all night long thinking about all my regrets. And I was like, oh, Grandma, no, I'm so sorry. And then she went through them with me, and she shared 5 regrets with me. And if you've seen me speak live at events, you've heard me tell the story before, but she went through the 5 regrets, and those 5 regrets, she's like, she went all the way back to being 17. She's like, it's not the specifics about my regrets. It's about why I have them. And she looked at me and she said, David, I'm going to die in this room, in this bed. I'm never going to get up from here, which I didn't believe was going to happen. I thought she was going to get better and leave. And she said, the reason I have these regrets is because I look back on all those 5 times and I came to a fork in the road and I had to make a decision. Do I take the safe road or do I take the risky road? And the safe road was the one where I kind of knew where the outcome was going to go. And the risky road was the one where all the gold was, like what I really wanted, the dream inside of me, but I wasn't sure if it'd work. And she said, I'm here at 86 and now I'm going to die here and I'll never know what could have been. And she looked at me and I said, oh, Grandma, you've had a great life. And I started giving her all these accolades and why she shouldn't feel bad. And she's like, she put her arm on me, her hand on my arm, and she squeezed me and she said, David, listen to me. It's my last lesson. You are young, and I don't want you to get to the end of your life and have regrets like this. And she said, so what's going to happen when you get to a fork in the road is there's going to be a little boy inside of you that wants to come out and play. And there's going to be a big boy inside of you who's going to want to take the safe road. And she's like, and that big boy, by the way, it could be your boss, it could be your father, it could be your mother, it could be society telling you go the safe way, go the safe way. And she's like, but the little boy inside of you, let that little boy come out and play. And she said, and everybody's got a little boy and a little girl inside of them, and tell other people, let the little boy or little girl come out and play. And I left her nursing care facility, went back to my office. I actually was in my car in the garage underneath my office in Orinda Theater Square, and I broke down crying. And I broke down crying because of what she just shared with me, but also because I knew what I was doing with my life, what I really wanted to do, like the little boy inside of me, wanted to leave Morgan Stanley, wanted to stop being a financial advisor, and wanted to dedicate my life to teaching people about money full time. And I made myself a promise right then and right there that within 3 years I would pick up and I would move and focus my life on financial education. Didn't know how, didn't know where, didn't know what it would look like. But ultimately what it ended up looking like is I moved to Manhattan, left Morgan Stanley, and kept writing more books. And at that point I'd written 2 books, but I've now written 13. And moving to New York was the game changer for me. My wife and I, at the time we moved to New York, we didn't know anyone. We didn't know if it would work. I walked away from a totally secure career to just go try and write books, to teach people how to be smarter with money, to be on national TV shows like the Today Show. Everyone said to me, Morgan, you're insane. I had management at Morgan Stanley sitting me down in the presence and say, I really don't think you should do this. You've got a great thing going. Everybody wants what you have. I was 9 years into my career. Are you sure you want to do this? And we did do it. And it changed everything. And it's funny now because people say to me, well, did you know it was going to work out? I'm like, no, that's why it's called the risky road, right? So that's the whole thing. If you know it's going to work out, it's not the risky road. And we've done this again. We picked up and we moved here 9 months ago to Florence, and I have a thriving business I'm a co-founder of. It's one of the fastest growing RIAs in the country with over 10 billion under management, and hugely risky thing to leave New York City and move to Florence. We didn't know anybody in Florence, but we wanted to design our lives again and grow and have a transformational experience for our family. And there was a lot that we had to do in order to pull that off, but it's the best thing we've ever done. Moving to Florence has been the greatest thing that we have ever done for our family, and and selfishly for myself too. And look, I've met so many good new friends like yourself. We just love it here. And little did I know we would be running into a coronavirus, but everybody's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're in Florence from the coronavirus." I'm like, "Hey, don't be sorry for me. Italy's done an incredible job. The city's so safe. Everybody stayed home. We're all healthy. It's a we culture. Everybody's banded together. And I'm just grateful to have been in Florence, Italy during this time." Yeah.
How's this move affected you or changed your life, or is it too early to say?
No, it's completely changed our life, because what happens, look, and I know you're Florentine, but you were living in the States and you've moved back home. But when you move, especially like for us, going to a new country, making all new friends, whole new culture, new language, it forces you, and doing it as a family unit, because that was the idea. We wanted our kids to live abroad before our kids went to college. And specifically my older son, Jack, I wanted him to live abroad in a foreign country before he went to college, because he's been living in Manhattan his whole life. And the weird thing is, living in Manhattan is a major city, but it's like a bubble too. I wanted my kids to see there's a whole world outside of Manhattan. And moving to a foreign country, it's called growth, right? There's so many growth experiences that come from moving abroad and living in a foreign country. And I think it's been transformational for our family to go through this together. We've gotten closer. We've made new friends. We've just all grown. And I think we find that we're pinching ourselves constantly. And I say this to you, even though we're now, we're 8 weeks into our quarantine. We went into the quarantine early because I've been podcasting about this and writing about it. We were like 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead of the United States. But I didn't, I had a lot of friends maybe some of my friends were watching. Some of our friends went home back to the States. We didn't go back to the States, and we're really happy here. And, it's just, I think one of the things that happens when you move abroad, at least this is from my personal experience, is you just really see there's this giant world out there. There's so many ways to live. And the Italian culture specifically is transformational. At least for me, it's been, because what I've seen in Italy is that in Italy, people slow down to the speed of life. There's a saying in Italy that people work to live. They don't live to work. When you and I went out and had lunch together, I think we had a 2-hour lunch. That's just not something that we would have done in LA or New York. In LA, you would have been rushing to get in your car and beat traffic. I would have been rushing somewhere else. Everything's about a rush in the United States. Whereas here, people go and they have their latte in the morning. They don't really have a latte, they have an espresso. And they're not on their phones, and they're reading the newspaper, and they're talking to each other. People have 3-hour dinners here. It's really made me, it took me a while, Morgan, to slow down. I know it probably even took you a while, but I'm happier.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sure you agonized about the decision to move for a long time. And then once you finally do it, you realize, what was I agonizing about? Of course it was the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, and look, there's just a lot of logistics that go into moving, right? And I think that's why most people often don't do it. I will tell, one thing since I've moved here, because I have been podcasting about it and writing about it, and I took my readers on this journey with me. A lot of people say to me, "Wow, I want to do that," and then I say to them, "Then go do it." And you don't always have to start with going away for a year. It could be going away for a month. A lot of you are going to be, look, the world's changed. You gave the numbers. 30 million people are unemployed, 19% unemployment. If there's ever been a time to recreate yourself, It's actually now.
Yeah.
Like for many people, this is your opportunity to recreate. If you are in a situation where you are bored where you are, where you've lost your job, whatever your situation might be, this is an opportunity to recreate, to start over fresh. So, and for me, it turned out Florence, Italy was what we chose. There are a lot of places you can go live. I highly recommend Italy. I highly recommend Florence. One reason we're doing this is we want to get people to come back to Italy, right? Like once it's safe to come back, I want to be on the front of like getting people to come back to Italy, because this is a country where tourism is critically important. Florence, critically important. And so many people think it's oh my God, like it's terrible in Italy. It's not terrible all over Italy. It's totally fine like in Florence right now. So once this quarantine is over and it's safe to travel again, one of the things I've told my friends is like, as soon as it's safe to travel again, you can get a deal coming to Italy, you should come, because these next 18 months are going to be really special here. It won't be as crowded, and there will be a really special energy here. You can already see it. I mean, as the restaurants are you're still in the country, so you don't even know yet. But they're starting to open up the stores slowly here in Florence, and the restaurants aren't open yet, and the bars aren't open yet. But they're coming in and they're starting to work on the place, and everybody's so excited to see each other. And so there's this incredible love and energy right now. Like, oh my God, once the restaurants open up, like, I know we got a social distance, but people are going to be so happy to be out again. Like, but I was the top, I posted about this today. I was the top of Piazza Michelangelo, and I've been walking up there a lot, and it's right by my house. So, at the top of Piazza Michelangelo, which is the best view, I think, to look down on Florence, it's so breathtaking. There are carts, like sell water and espresso and chips and sandwiches and tourist stuff. And normally there's just thousands of people up there. And so there's just a big line, and you never get to meet anybody in those carts. Well, I was up there yesterday. The guy opened up, Leonardo. It's true, I'm not making that up. His name's Leonardo. I didn't know his name yesterday, but I was one of the first people I bought my euro of water after walking 15,000 steps, and he was like, hi, and he gave me the water, and I came back today, and he's like, what are you doing here? Like, he's like, I go, I live here. And I'm like, what's your name? He's like, Leonardo. I'm like, I'm David. And so, those kind of moments are unique to the times that we're in. And the example I would give to where I've lived this before is I actually moved, Morgan, to New York City right after 9/11. And that's interesting too, because I made the plan to move to New York in the summer. And I told all my clients, I'm retiring from Morgan Stanley. I'm moving to New York City. I'm going to write these books and try to go on the Today Show and do, national media. And then 9/11 happened. And my clients are like, well, you're not going to go now, are you? I'm like, at the time I was like, I'll be damned if terrorism is going to change my life plans. I was on planes traveling, doing speeches 3 days after 9/11 because the show had to go on, and some of the events I was doing were not canceled, unlike now. But downtown New York City, there was a love and an energy and a camaraderie in Manhattan for a couple of years after 9/11 that was unbelievable. And I think that that's going to be very unique to Italy again. Like that then, I think Italy and lots of places will be like that. And I'm excited to be a part of that and to live through where we're going in the next year to 18 months. I think it's going to be a really special time to be here.
So we have about 5 minutes or so. So afterwards, Jane, if you're on and want to maybe collect some questions for later. I had a question, I guess a couple questions, but one of them was, this idea of paying yourself first and make it sort of on autopilot, right? In this environment where we're talking about potentially negative interest rates, or we're close to zero interest rates, and the population is getting older, it seems like that becomes even more difficult to achieve. How is your job getting harder in a way, right? Because the tools maybe are slightly changing. Can you talk to a little bit of that? I mean, the financial environment has changed so much.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. In fact, it's a really good point because there's a lot of things I want to say about what you can do right now. So let's, the question on everybody's mind, and you and I were talking about this like a month ago, right? Like in March, you're like, oh my God, how much worse can this get? And then we turned around in April and had the best month in the S&P 500 in 30 years. Yeah. So, the market's only down 16% from its all-time high. I would argue it shouldn't have been that high to begin with.
Right.
So the fact is the market right now is where it was really at the end of 2018, which is really phenomenal. You depending on when, you look from the last recession to now, still had great returns. And they were double-digit returns until like recently. So, annualized returns, the market since 1926 has had an annualized return with reinvested dividends of basically 10%. And it's funny because, well, Warren Buffett, he's my favorite financial teacher is Warren Buffett. And I've gone to the Berkshire Hathaway conferences and that he does in Omaha. And this is the first time he's had to do one like this. He had to do a virtual one. And he was asked this question and he basically said, 2 days ago, he's like, look, I don't know where the market's going and nobody else knows where the market's going. What I believe is that you should be investing in an index fund and automatically invest in dollar cost average and bet on America to win because American companies always come back. Good American companies are innovative and they come back and the market recovers. And so, will returns be lower in the future? I don't know. I think if you have a diversified portfolio, and the key is diversified because nobody's usually all 100% in an S&P 500 fund. If you're diversified between bonds and stocks, and you've got diversification inside your bond portfolio, inside your stock portfolio, market's going to return 7, 8, 9, 10% annualized, depending on how risky you are. The challenge right now for people who are retired is that because the rates have been pushed down to zero, that really affects retirees' income streams. But there are still other ways for retirees to get income streams. And most people who are retired who've got a fixed income portfolio, still getting 4 or 5 or 6% on that money. The fact that new money is 0% doesn't mean that old money is 0%, right? Like I've got muni bonds that are paying 5% tax-free. In fact, huge opportunity in fixed income because fixed income's gotten crushed and it's actually not come back as much. So I'm actually optimistic. I'm also a realist. Like this, we're in a global recession. We're going to take, you're not going to just turn the light switch on and have everything better. People talk about a V-shaped recovery and then a a U-shaped recovery and a W-shaped recovery. I would spend no time on that. I would focus on your family's economy. And what I would tell you is you need to control the controllables. So it's amazing. Everybody stayed online this whole time. You need to control the controllables. Here's what you can control. You have no control over the economy. You have no control over what the government does. What you can control is your family's finances. So I'll give you, I've got a little, where my notes go. 5 things you can control. Number 1, you have control over what you spend. And we've all spent less money in the last 2 months. But as we start to leave these quarantines, I'm telling you, if you've not cut your overhead, you should be cutting your overhead right now. You should be going through your bills. If you have a job that is in jeopardy of being lost, if you have if you don't have a big financial cushion, like to me, a big financial cushion is you don't have 6 months of expenses set aside or more, you should be cutting your expenses every single way you can. So you should go through your bills like they're not your bills, like they're my bills. Right? Like that way you won't be emotional about it. Like, nope, you don't need this. Nope, you don't need this. Nope, you don't need this. And you shut all this stuff off. People are still belonging to gyms and they're not going to the gym for months. Anything that you're paying for that you don't absolutely need, that's not like oxygen, you should get rid of it right now because this thing could drag on. You may have a job right now, but you may not have it in 90 days. Not all businesses are recovering. The bankruptcies have not even started. You're going to start seeing bankruptcies every week. There's going to be big bankruptcies, but it takes 6, 7, 8, 9 months for the bankruptcies to hit. So everybody's right now operating on phantom cash from the government. There's this little 90-day hold period where everybody's still holding on to their life preservers because the government threw money at everyone. But that money is going away here in 30 days. They're not throwing money at everyone for a year. So cut your expenses. Second thing, control the controllables. If you have debt, refinance your debt. Because what you just said about rates going to zero means that you can refinance everything right now. Car loans, home loans, student loans, credit cards. That's things that you can spend time and energy on, because if you refinance your home right now, you can save 0.5% right now easily, maybe 1% on your home. Home rates are the lowest they've ever been, ever. Yeah. And the average American can save 6 figures in interest payments. So go refinance. Here's the thing about refinancing. You got to go get in the queue right now, because lots of people want to refinance. So this is the time to be doing it. So I said, cut expenses, refinance. Third thing, renegotiate. Anything that you're paying for that is optional, renegotiate. Sucks to be a landlord when your tenant calls you and wants to lower their rent, but a lower rent is better than no tenant right now.
Right.
So if you have a rental, if you're renting, if you have an office lease, pretty much anything that you're paying for right now is kind of open for renegotiation, and you should be making those phone calls and renegotiating. And the fourth thing I would tell you, things you can control, this is not so much financial as it is mental. You can control your mindset. So what you focus on, where you spend your time and energy, what you look at impacts how you feel and ultimately often how you do. And if you were spending time on toxic energy things like news, I don't care which news you're watching, pick a channel. It's toxic.
Yeah.
It's designed to be toxic because that's how they keep you in order to sell you an advertisement in between what they're saying. So if the more you can turn off the news, focus on positive things, like, well, hopefully like, this is a positive thing, but putting your time and energy into positive things can improve how you feel. Spending time with positive people. If you've got negative, toxic friends around you, don't take all the phone calls right now. You've got to raise the way you're feeling. And the last thing is physical. I know we're going over a little bit, but hey, what else we got to do? That's the beauty of a live event. We don't have to leave. Your physical well-being right now, as we start to leave our homes, these are all things we know, but the things that we can do to improve our immune system: rest, exercise, nutrition, right? Like, most of us are not going to get sick, and yeah, we can wear our masks and we need to, and yeah, we can social distance and we're going to, but the things you can do at home to improve your immune system include what you do physically for your health, and that's really important.
No, this is such great advice. I have one last question, since we are going over a few minutes, and then we'll try to open up for some questions. You have a lot going on. What's next for David right now?
Look, I just saw we have more viewers on now than we had when we started. A lot's going on, and here let me give you I'll give you a couple examples too of why I have a lot going on. So when this all happened, Morgan, because you know I've gotten to be pretty good buddies in the last 6, 7, 8 months as we've gotten to know each other, right? And we talk about things, and as this thing started happening, like, I don't know about, like, I was bummed first couple of weeks with the market going down, you know, watching our assets drop from our RIA, seeing what's happening, holding people's hands. And I know this about myself: I can work or I can worry. And the way I get out of worrying is to work. And when I say work, what I mean is, if I'm of service, like this is not really work, but like, to me, this is work. Like, if I can be of service to people, I feel better. So I've been doubling down, tripling down on my service to others. So I've done a lot of these. I mean, the crazy thing is, I've been in front of we did one of these the other day, same room here. I had 8,000 people online. I've been in front of tens of thousands of people in the last 30 days. And then the podcast, I started kicking out my podcast. So if you don't listen to my podcast, go over and put in the Latte Factor podcast on the lattefactor.com. I started putting out podcasts every week to share what was happening here and give people some hope. We've had more people download the podcast in the last month than the previous 6 months. So things I'm working on: brand new podcast coming out, the David Bach Show. We're launching it in June. Incredible partnership with a new good friend of mine, Rachel Hollis and Dave Hollis. That's the first time that's publicly been shared. That's coming out in June. brand new website, which is also not publicly shared yet, but I'll tell people right now. I have created a program completely free. You can go check it out right now. It is a program that is a 5-day course. It'll take you by the hand, help you build your security account, look at your credit, help you protect your credit score, increase your credit, then go from renting to buying a home. Also show you how to refinance if you already own a home and how to work with a realtor. It's a program called the First Time Homebuyer Challenge, and it is on a website called askdavidbach.com. Askdavidbach.com. It's in partnership with Money Magazine, money.com. We'll be putting that out in June, but you can go through it right now. It's free and you can check that all out. And what else am I doing? We're launching a whole other website at finishrich.com for consumer finance. So that's going to come out in June. So yeah, got a bunch of stuff going on.
Are you getting any sleep?
It's funny. I mean, I don't know about you. Like, we have been getting a lot of sleep, right? Like the weirdest thing, because our kids don't have to be up and out of the house at 7:30. We're sleeping longer. Yeah, no, I'm getting plenty of sleep. But I'm actually, I think I'm in better shape than I was 2 months ago. I've been doing my work. I've been doing my workouts at home. So
I wish I could say the same.
But you look good.
Jane, are you available?
Hello, I'm here.
Great.
Jane.
Maybe we can just pick a couple questions for David.
Thank you, first of all, so much, David. That was certainly very inspiring. You've shared some very valuable lessons that
Thank you.
much appreciated as well by everyone who's tuned in, and definitely some great quotes there that we won't be forgetting. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
One question that a few people were curious about is financial education in schools. So why do you think that it isn't taught or isn't developed? To have your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's not taught because if you keep people financially illiterate, somebody else benefits, right? So who benefits? The companies that are providing the loans, the credit card companies benefit, the education system, the money, the government. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if Americans are dependent on the government gets to keep increasing. There is an ulterior motive to keep people financially ignorant. And all you have to ask yourself is who benefits? And who benefits? The banks, the credit card companies, the government who provides the loans for student loans, the schools. It should be, here's the thing. It should be a bipartisan, no-brainer that financial education should be in schools. It should be a part of the core curriculum. Why would we require our kids to know basic, math, science, reading, and writing, and not need to know about money? The whole reason we spend all this money sending our kids to college, we're going to debt, over $1 trillion in student loans right now. That never should happen. That's because the government's in the student lending business and colleges are way over inflated price-wise. The reason this all happens is because of a lack of financial education. So Republicans and Democrats should say, this needs to be fixed. It needs to be a part of the core curriculum. We, as voters, we should be requiring this. But it's, what, people have been talking about this forever. And the thing that's frustrating is I don't believe it will be fixed. And here's the truth: wealthy schools have financial education in their schools. It's the poor schools that don't. Again, because it's not part of if it's not part of the testing curriculum, it's optional. Now, state by state, many of the states are starting to pick it up. And so it is a state by state, school district by school district thing that is taking place. And the good news is more schools have it now than ever, but it's still not a national thing. And one of the things I've talked about, you can see I can talk forever on this topic, but like once upon a time, there was a presidential physical fitness test. Do you remember that, Morgan?
Oh, yeah.
It was a big deal. Like, and you started it like, and there was these things that you did in order to get a badge. Very few kids got that badge. It took me until 8th grade to win that badge. You had to do a 6-minute mile and 10 pull-ups and 50 push-ups, and it was hard. And so like a small, but you worked towards it. And that was a presidential physical fitness challenge. And I always said, like Trump, if you're listening, because anybody can put this on, create a presidential financial fitness challenge. Let's inspire our children to learn, save, and invest, and make it a part of the core curriculum. Hi, my name is David Bach, and I approve that message.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. One other request then perhaps to finish on is from a guest who asked, could you speak more about play to win, not play to not lose, which I imagine is a quote from...
Oh, so that person, obviously, the person give you their name because they just read this off of Instagram. It's my latest Instagram post. Who is it?
Elisa Lamas. I possibly
okay.
Pop it up on the screen for us now.
So, play to win versus play to not lose. I mean, first of all, it's a sports analogy, right? But the reality is it applies to life. Like, either you're truly playing to win, which means you're putting yourself fully out there and you're taking the risk of losing, or you're just playing it safe. It kind of goes back to my grandmother box fork in the road store, right? Like, picking up for us and moving to Florence was playing to win. Playing to win for like the game of life. Playing it safe would have been just staying in New York. We had a great life. Playing to win was leaving Morgan Stanley and moving to New York. Playing it safe would have been staying in the Bay Area. By the way, and again, a lot of people play it safe, but here's the problem with playing it safe. You can still lose. I mean, the funny thing about life, like a lot of people have been going to jobs for 10, 20 years they didn't like playing it safe, and now they've lost that job. And they didn't like the job to begin with, right? So I think as we go out of this quarantine and you think about the rest of your life, and if you take my 10-year time horizon, you go, look, if you only had 10 years left to live, how do you want to live these next 10 years? And what would it look like to you to come out of this time, this quarantine, and play these next 10 years to win? And then work on that question for yourself. Then ask yourself, well, what would it look like to play it to not lose? And it's almost like having two columns. And then you get the choice to decide which one's more, what do you want to do? Which one do you want to go for? By the way, you can bounce back and forth. Not everybody's always playing to win. But I don't know. I think the juice of life comes out of playing to win versus playing to not lose. And look, there have been times in my life that I've played to not lose. I think one of the things that's very easy to happen once you have a certain level of success is that then you don't want to fail. Like a lot of us, we're always afraid of failing. The one thing that helped me get to where I am when I was young is I had no fear of failing. I just wasn't scared. I was like, I'll try anything. I'm not the same way now. I work on pushing myself out of my comfort zone. You know, my thing, like technology like this, I was like, StreamYard? What do you mean you want to do some StreamYard? I finally just learned how to use Zoom. But you guys convinced me to try new technology. I like this new technology. So, see, I listened to you. I went along with it. Worked out well. Anybody else? You want to round? I mean,
there have been quite a few questions. Hopefully, we might get a chance to have a look at them afterwards. But perhaps one other then is: have you any website recommendations for investment ideas and stock insights? A few people were curious about that. Any direction you could give?
Oh God, that's such a boring one to end on. I mean, Google, like
people are interested, people are curious.
You know, where did I look? I start my kids off on CNBC, right? So I taught them how to look up stocks, and we went to the CNBC website. Then you can go deeper into stocks on Morningstar. Depending on where you open up your brokerage account, the brokerage accounts have all kinds of research right there. So like you put in a stock, and then up comes all the different places of outside research that you can click on. But I think CNBC, Morningstar, Wall Street Journal, those are and Yahoo Finance, those are 4 great places to start at looking at. And money.com, go check out money.com. But it's not so much stock ideas as overall investing. Barron's, I look at Barron's. Okay, so like, where do I go? Barron's, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Yahoo, Market Watch. And I can go through all those sites too, like just to see across the board what's going on. I can do all that in like 5-10 minutes. Great.
Well, David, this has absolutely been a treat for us. Thank you for spending this evening with us. It's great to have you in Florence, and you've definitely enriched our community here. So hopefully you guys will be here for a while.
Listen, thank you, Morgan. And everybody needs to keep coming to your Lungarno Chats. Tell them where to go, because you have these incredible chats that you do every single month. You're doing them online right now, but eventually we'll be doing them probably again live. So tell them where they should go to find you.
Thank you. Yes, lungarnochats.com. We try to have as interesting people, inspiring people like David on the show, and we're lucky that there's a lot of interesting people in this community. And now with this format, obviously we can branch out and have always people that we can learn from. So thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. Jane, thank you. Thank you to the Florentine.
Thank you.
And thank you for everyone for logging in and following us. It's great to see so many people online and being active. So thank you and have a good evening.
Cheers, everybody. Take
Bye.
care. Thanks, Jane. Bye-bye. Thanks, Morgan.
Bye.
Ciao.